Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here at this occasion to honor and commemorate the legacy of a visionary who rendered an indelible service as an engineer. And to deliver the first address of this evening, I warmly invite to the podium a distinguished engineer who will deliver the welcome address, the current president of the IESL, Engineer Vimalsena Gamage.
Wijewardene, good evening. Past presidents, President-elect, Vice Presidents, fellow engineers of the IESL and Chief Executive Secretary of the IESL, Mr. Wijewardene, President of the Council, member of the Wijewardene Charitable Trust Fund, and family members of the and relatives of the Wijewardene family. The guest speaker, Mr. Nagesh Rao, Chief Technologist and Entrepreneur in Residence, US Small Business Administration. Distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. As President of IESL, it is my great pleasure to warmly welcome all of you for the annual Wijewardene Memorial Lecture today. As members of the Learned Society, it is our duty to commemorate the great personalities of the engineering fraternity, those who have rendered yeoman service to our society for sustainable development and economic development of the country. It will greatly encourage and remind our present generation the duty to the society as professionals. In short, without taking too much of your valuable time, I have to mention here Deshamanya Vidyajyoti, Dr. Philip Rewata Wijewardene was a great engineer and fellow member of our prestigious institution of Engineers Sri Lanka, and he was an aviator. As an inventor, he invented a number of devices to assist small farmers in developing countries. He was an authority on tropical farming and natural resources management, on which he originated the systematic thinking. Please allow me to warmly welcome guest speaker, Mr. Nagesh Rao, Chief Technologist and Entrepreneur in Residence, UK Small Business Administration. Once again, I would like to welcome family members and relatives of Wijewardene family and all of you in the August gathering for this important memorial lecture. Thank you.
Adding to that note of welcome, ladies and gentlemen, the House would like to respectfully recognize and welcome the presence of Her Excellency, the Ambassador of the Netherlands in Sri Lanka, Mrs. Joanne Doenwald, Professor Tissa Vitharana, Member of Parliament, and several other dignified members of the diplomatic community whose presence here this evening truly honors us all. Continuing with the agenda for the evening, ladies and gentlemen, we now open the podium for a brief introduction about the Wijewardene Charitable Trust and to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening. So to perform this introduction, I warmly invite to the podium a legal luminary whose name speaks volumes of his prowess as a Lion of Halsdorf. Please welcome Mr. Wijewardene, President's Council.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I, on behalf of the Wijewardene Charitable Trust, welcome you to the 6th Annual Wijewardene Memorial Lecture. Cineri gloria sera est. Glory paid to ashes comes too late. But what must be said, must be said. There are some men who should not be forgotten. We must not let them be forgotten, for they have during their lifetime contributed immensely to the well-being of man and the preservation of nature. Such a man was Ray. He was unobtrusively brilliant. He lived and passed on from one dimension to the next with dignity and modesty. His brilliant idea of replacing the buffalo at the plough with a two-stroke engine made a huge difference to the everyday working life of the village farmer, and no doubt to the buffalo. Some made a lot of money out of Ray's invention, but he did not care, for he had achieved his purpose. His persistent and stubborn views on renewable energy, the need for innovation and invention, were not merely dreams or ideas which did not reach fruition. He was passionate and unstoppable when it came to converting these ideas into practical applications, into machines and processes. Ray was an adventurer and a sportsman, a truly versatile man. Ladies and gentlemen, above all, he was a good man, and he was my friend. It is to honor this man and the need to perpetuate his vision that his three daughters, Anoma, Roshi, and Mandy, together with a few friends, established the Wijewardene Charitable Trust. I was invited to be a member of the Board of Trustees, and I am quite proud of that. Ladies and gentlemen, the Trust is committed to the promotion and advancement of higher education and research in the spheres of science, engineering, agriculture, energy, the environment, the arts, and other areas of public interest. The Trust is also committed to the provision of scholarships or any form of financial assistance to scholars and researchers in these fields, and for the conducting of seminars, conferences, workshops, and allied activities for the purpose of developing knowledge in these fields. The main events of the Wijewardene Trust are the Ray Awards, which recognize the most innovative inventors, and of course this, the annual Wijewardene Memorial Lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, this year we have the privilege of a brilliant gentleman whom I had tea with a little while ago. If I met him before I wrote this, my introduction of this young man would have been quite different. But then I'll stick to my script. As I was saying, we have the privilege of this brilliant gentleman, Mr. G, emphasis G, Nagesh Rao, delivering this prestigious lecture. Mr. Rao's achievements are too numerous to be mentioned here, as it would eat into time allotted to him. However, by way of brief introduction, Mr. Rao is a 2016 USA Eisenhower Fellow, engineer, and also IP legal advisor on matters relating to innovation ecosystems. Tell us all about it. He has also been introduced as a multifaceted thought leader with titles that include technologist, commercialization strategist, and policy expert with experience in fields such as science, law, business, public policy, renewable energy, and agriculture. Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the honor of inviting Mr. Rao to deliver his lectures.
Distinguished colleagues, friends, family, thank you very much for welcoming me here today. My name is Wijewardene. I want to give a special thanks to the Wijewardene sisters, Anoma and Mandy, who are here, my colleague Ramya from the Fulbright Commission, as well as the professors and chancellors and academics I've met here today. I want to give a quick shout out to Harsha, where are you? Right there, a fellow Eisenhower Fellow from 2 years ago. As well, also a big thanks to my partner in crime, my fiancée Kaylee Wasenko, who is here with me on this journey. She's been my rock and has helped me kind of navigate through this fellowship over the last year, but in particular these past months as we've just gotten to Sri Lanka from our travels in Vietnam for the first half of my overseas sabbatical. It's a privilege and honor to give this lecture, and when Anoma reached out to me after Ramya had recommended me, and thank you again, Ramya. I wasn't sure if I could actually do it at first because the legacy of Ray Wijewardene was just enormous. You know, this is a guy who was an Olympic athlete. He was an entrepreneur. He was a fighter for the small person. He was an agrotech pioneer. He did a lot, and in my limited career so far, I just hope I can achieve at least a little bit of what he's done for this country and for his profession. So it's a big honor to be here in front of you and discuss my topic of innovation ecosystems today. So I'd like to start off with a little bit of info about me and my current efforts. And if you need me to speak to the microphone, I will, but you do? Okay, all right. I was hoping to get away with that. But yes, I'm an Eisenhower Fellow, but I'll keep on talking in the meantime, but go for it. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. I have a pretty unique and crazy background. The funny thing happened on the way to the forum is what I like to tell my friends, and my friends like to reiterate that. I'm the son of immigrant entrepreneurs, and I got into the family business, which was real estate, at the age of 14. My dad had an opportunity to leave India to come to America as a physician, and decided that during that time when he was in the States with my two older sisters, my mom, to also get into real estate. He got my mom into that, and me and my sisters had to do that. And that was also how we paid for college. I had trained as an engineer and technologist at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. I studied semiconductor materials and biomaterials at RBI, but also at Cornell. I worked in IP law. I spent time as a patent examiner. I was that guy who said no to your patent applications, so I'm sorry. But I've also worked in public policy. I worked for the National Academy of Sciences. I worked for the U.S. Department of Commerce. I was a senior advisor to the director of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and also to the Secretary of Commerce during President Obama's first term of administration. And then I left to the private sector and started working on a bunch of startups and advising a number of venture capitalists and inventors and whatnot. And a few companies who I've helped out have done very well since. And so as a result of that, the U.S. government called me back up and said, why don't you come back and help us out at the U.S. Small Business Administration. The U.S. Small Business Administration is a very small agency, but it is a cabinet ranking level agency. That means my boss, the administrator, Maria Contreras-Sweet, is a member of the President's Cabinet. She is the advocate and the voice for small businesses across the United States of America and has the ear of President Obama as it relates to small businesses being a crucial ingredient in America's economic ecosystem. We have a saying of 3 C's and a D. The U.S. Small Business Administration loves to work with capital, helping people get access to financial capital and social capital, contracting, helping get access to federal grants and contracts, counseling, helping small business entrepreneurs access the resources and grow their company into something bigger, and also disaster relief. When a disaster occurs, the United States actually has a set of programs to help small businesses and entrepreneurs get access to much needed emergency capital to keep their shops afloat until it's time to get back into the game. division I'm part of as Chief Technologist is the Office of Investment Innovation. And I serve in a really unique role because I get to be their nerdy residents, is what we like to joke about. They call me as their geek. And I'm the one who stirs the kettle pot. I'm the guy who goes in and messes around and stuff to make government better, to make it more efficient, more effective, to represent and advocate for the needs of the people. My customer base at the U.S. Small Business Administration is 300 million people. I serve the American public. That is who I serve, and that's those 300 million citizens is who I look out for every day. And the work I work on is the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Technology Transfer Research Programs. But before I get into that, our portfolio in the Office of Investment and Innovation, which I advise on to my bosses and administrator, include the Small Business Investment Company and our Innovation Support Programs, which include accelerator programs, demo days, and crowdfunding, thought leadership. The Small Business Investment Company is really unique because that's what gave birth to modern day venture capital in America. That is a debt leverage program that helps venture funds and investors tap into federal funds to utilize, like a credit card. They must pay the money back at a low interest. But it's a line of credit that they can use to invest into SMEs. The companies that have resulted from the SBIC programs lending, per se, to the venture funds and investment companies have included Apple Computer, Costco, FedEx, Under Armour, and many more. Our accelerator programs are designed to help incubators, accelerators, and co-sharing workspace environments, the best of the best in America, to give them a little bit of an operational seed funding so that they can continue operations and get the needed expertise in their teams to help the number of small businesses that they touch every day in scaling up and growing. What I'm going to talk a little bit more about, though, is the portfolio I help run, which is a $2.5 billion per year set aside for small businesses to do high-end research and development for the federal government. This program is pretty phenomenal because it runs through 11 federal agencies, and the U.S. Small Business Administration is the umbrella oversight. So we actually are the head oversight of the program, policy and programmatically. We answer to Congress, we answer to the White House, we address the issues and help coordinate the strategy and movement of these programs in conjunction with these agencies who administer the funds through various grants and contracts to small businesses, U.S. small businesses, to do high-end research. It's a key catalytic funding. The coolest part, we don't take an equity stake. We don't assert any ownership on the intellectual property. What does that mean? The small business company that does that sponsored federal government research gets to keep the money, gets to keep the patents, copyrights, trademarks that they've developed as a result of that technology that emanates out from that research, and gets to build forward. Now, you guys are going, that is crazy. You get $2.5 billion per year. Why would you do that? You know, why wouldn't you take a little bit of an equity stake? And I'll get to that in a second. In fiscal year 15, we awarded about 4,358 awards to these innovative small business companies across the United States in the forms of Phase 1 and Phase 2 awards. And our sister program, the Small Business Technology Transfer Program, awarded another 730 awards. A Phase 1 award is around $150,000, and that is meant for feasibility study around the technology's concept of interest. If you do a really good job with that study, the program managers will give you a Phase 2, which is $1 million to build that prototype and scale it up. The sister program, STTR, operates in the same way as the SBIR program, but you are asked to work with a research institution partner. So when you get your funding, award funding, you have to allocate 30% of that dollars to a research institution. So an academic professor or PI at a lab can do the technology development with you transferring and scaling up that technology into a viable product. So why do I work on America's Seed Fund? I'm going to play a video, but these are the companies that have resulted from our program. These are major companies: Biogen, IDEC, iRobot, Symantec, 23andMe, Qualcomm, Lyft Labs, MainSpace. This is just scratching the surface. We have literally seeded the future. This program is responsible for 70% of the components in all mobile devices today. And I'll have a slide that breaks down all the federal funding research that is done that makes the iPhone tick today. But Qualcomm got its early stage funding from our program back in the 1980s. Now, it's only for small businesses, so when they graduate, some of them graduate into very big companies like Qualcomm and Wijewardene. Some stay small, but the whole point is that we're giving a shot to these companies to do that innovative research and development for the needs of the federal government with the hope that they commercialize and scale it up further. I'm going to play this video because it's a favorite of mine, and Tony Mulligan, who did the video for me, has come up with something really unique, and I think you would appreciate what he's doing here, and he's one of our recent SBR awardees. Oh, is the sound? Oh, yeah, there we go.
Technology is a small high-tech company. We've been around for about 6 years, and we have established international acclaim for our flagship product line, which is Emily, a robotic lifeguard saving device. We also have developed and manufactured and sell high-end autonomous robotic vehicles used for hurricane tracking and for services by our Navy sailors. These robotic devices are important for keeping first responders and our Navy personnel out of harm's way as robots do the double dangerous work.
Our company, Economics, is a small business located in Cerrito, Arizona. SBIR gave us the foundation on which to build our corporation. It provided us the initial funding to move forward in research and development to develop systems which are both commercially and militarily important.
4 years ago, we received our first SBIR program from the U.S. Navy. Those were the first dollars that we received as a company from outside. Until that point, we had been investing our own resources into trying to develop our technology. And with that first SBIR program, we were able to begin developing core capabilities that were required to translate into commercial markets and opportunities that we wanted to pursue. Economics has shipped Emily rescue systems to faraway locations including Indonesia, Mongolia, South Korea, France, many locations throughout the world. I would like to add additional advice to other entrepreneurs interested in concerning the SBIR program. Really important that you apply for programs that you want to do and you're passionate about and that you will feel good that you're doing. Don't just submit programs in order to try to win contracts. Submit programs on the areas that you can really do a good job. That's what entrepreneurship is about. So good luck.
So what's really interesting about that robotic device that we funded through our U.S. Navy's SBIR program is that it's being deployed globally. The situation that's been occurring in Syria with the refugees going off to the coast of Italy and Greece, his device is being deployed by the Red Cross to help those refugees get to safe land. And what's interesting, it's a lifeguard. That's what it is. It's a robotic lifeguard system that was created with some Department of Defense's Navy's SBIR program, but it's been pivoted towards humanitarian use. And that's what I love about Tony. He's a good friend of mine, and he came up with this vision. He said, look, if we're going to develop this technology, let's have a lot of different purposes. Let's not just do it for one thing only. And so he figured out a humanitarian purpose with it, and so he's commercializing on that front. As I said before, why work on America's Seed Fund? It is a front row seat to the future. We've deployed over $43 billion since the inception of the program back in 1982. Scratching the surface alone, our return on investment is more than triple. Just with Qualcomm and Wijewardene, those two companies combined from a market cap value is over $130 billion. That is more than triple my ROI, and that's not even getting into all the interesting stuff that has occurred as a result. The number of jobs we've created, the number of technologies that have been instituted. I have right here, Made in Space. That is the small business company that NASA's SBIR program has funded. That is 3D printing on the space station. We're making that happen. And the coolest part about that is that we actually seed funded the original 3D printing technologies back in the 1990s. We were taking those risks ahead of time and de-risking. And that's what a good government program does. It is helping set policy frameworks and setting ideas out there to help cajole and incentivize high-risk hardware development so that the private market can jump on it when it's ready to go. So with that, I'm going to go into my deep dive of the lecture, which is what is an innovation ecosystem and why is it important? And SBIR in America plays a very crucial catalytic role in making innovation ecosystems happen. So I'll get into that a little bit more. Innovation ecosystem is the term to describe the large and diverse array of participants and resources that contribute to and are necessary for ongoing innovation in the modern economy. So what does that mean? That means you've got partners from the private sector, the nonprofit sector, the public sector, crazy technologists, garage entrepreneurs, very vastly different. Think of it like an ecological ecosystem. But you have these cast of characters interacting and engaging and building off each other's strengths in a supportive and collaborative manner. These clusters tend to rally around particular areas of technological growth and interest. They're supported through smart alignment of social, intellectual, and financial capital. A good example, which I'll let you know more about in a second in my slide, is the Sri Lankan Nanotech Initiative at SLITech. That is a great example of an emerging innovation ecosystem here in Sri Lanka around nanotechnology. And it's a public-private partnership. And I talk about that from the GWIT model. The GWIT model is where government, university, and industry private sector work together, but work off their core strengths. Government's great when it comes to being a policy framework, setting forward-thinking, incentivization agency. That is what we do best. We're critical with the institutional infrastructure financing, and we're smart and pragmatic with regulations. That is good government. Government is there to help and make sure things happen and the connections happen, but then gets out of the way. That is what smart government does, in my personal humble opinion. And I've seen it. I've seen it work well in the US and with our SBIR programs. That's what we're doing. Universities, that is the mecca of free thinking. That is where you generate talent pool and intellectual capital. That is where you can take risks as a student and do so in a safe environment where you have a lot of people around you, rallying around you and helping you figure out that next phase. That is where you spark curiosity. And hopefully spark curiosity in a direction that can really gravitate forward. Private sector, those are the folks who are the titans of product refinement and commercialization. That's what the private sector does well. They are there for scale up and there for commercialization. That's what they do really well. What types of innovation ecosystems have I been seeing over the years emerging around the world? Advanced manufacturing hubs, as we've seen in China. Defense technology clusters, as very popular in the United States. IT and cybersecurity, Silicon Valley. That's what that is. And everyone's trying to copy Silicon Valley, and I'm going to get into that in a moment to remind you that maybe that's not a good idea, unless you're really ready to go for the long haul. Clean energy hubs are starting to pop everywhere because climate change is real. We need clean energy solutions. We need to get off our addiction to petrol. And clean energy is the way to do it. Through hydro, solar, wind, all of that. We need it all. Life sciences, that's huge. That is huge. Life sciences is big. Health is a big deal. We want to live long. We want to live well. And as the Internet of Things comes around as a result of IT and cybersecurity, that marrying between biologics and information technology is going to be huge. Agri-tech. Everyone's got to eat. Everyone needs to nourish. Agri-tech's huge. And here in Sri Lanka, you've got a big agriculture base, just as in Vietnam when I was there. So that's a big innovation ecosystem that's become a more reality. My fiance and I were lucky. I got to attend a luncheon with Secretary Vilsack, who is the Secretary of Agriculture under President Obama's cabinet. He's an alum of a law school I went to, and he gave a talk about agri-tech and bio-based economy. It's $1 trillion economy, and he points out that it is important to know that food, environmental security, those are issues of big need right now. and folks who can come up with some innovative technologies to address those areas of interest are going to help produce a better future for the world. I put this slide up here because this is how all the different countries are doing when it comes to research and development. Because what is innovation ecosystems? That's all about research and development, and it's all about scale up of that R&D and in a manner that becomes useful and evocative to help produce a better economy. And let's be honest for a second, it's a crucial ingredient to a country's GDP. If you look at the slides here, you see the US has got this massive R&D budget as a percentage of its GDP. But look who's coming along, China. They've got 1 billion people, we've got 300 million. And then look at Japan, and look at South Korea. Much smaller populations, but they are taking their R&D really seriously, including Sweden. And they're doing a really good job, if you look right here, with much limited resources. And that's what gets really interesting is that America's got this, let's just say, we've got this edge because we're a pretty big country and we won World War II and that kind of helped us out. But you see a country like China, they are realizing that innovation and technology development is very important as it relates to emerging economy growth and development. And same with India, you see all these different countries. They're realizing science and technology is a very crucial ingredient in innovation ecosystems to grow and foster a long-term sustainable economic growth plan if your country wants to succeed and be a leader in technology development and deployment. South Korea, I mean, let's be honest, they've got faster internet than anywhere else in the world. It's mind-boggling what they're doing there. And Samsung, that company is so big, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with this, but Samsung's value as it relates to South Korea's GDP, by the way, it's around 25 to 30%. That company, that one company alone, makes up around 20 to 30% of South Korea's GDP. That is massive. That is telling you something about some smart policy frameworks being put forth by those countries, but also the innovators and the technologists there who are really realizing what it means to develop science and technology for a very applied and practical purpose for development and commercialization scale. I was telling you about the iPhone, and I have to say this a lot because I think the combination, and even when I went back in the government from the private sector, it was like, oh, do I really want to go back? Government can be kind of dull, and all they do is just stamp stuff and push it out, But no, government can actually be really cool if you do it right. And government can fuel innovation. And the iPhone, the coolest thing that Steve Jobs created, well, guess what? He benefited from crucial investments in all sorts of technology done by the US government, including CERN, which created the internet. But here's what's amazing. The Department of Energy pioneered those lithium-ion batteries. They fueled that funding for that. DRAM cache, that was DARPA. The click wheel, that was CERN. Multi-touch screen, well, that was Energy, National Science Foundation, and their Department of Defense. Oh, and the CIA, or Central Intelligence Agency. Navstar GPS, that was Department of Defense. The micro hard drive, DARPA. Microprocessor, DARPA. All this stuff, from his iPod to the iPhone, iPad, which takes in a lot of these components and into there, that came from government funding, crucial investments in R&D ahead of its time because they knew down the road it was going to have to be deployed in an effective manner and we would let the private market do that. As I mentioned, going into the public-private partnership being the crucial binding agent that makes an innovation ecosystem work. You guys are familiar with this Syntec, correct? I would hope so, yes. But what's really interesting about this one, that it has become a center of excellence. What's funny is, I actually heard about Syntec back in the States about 7, 8 years ago. I was doing research at the National Academy of Sciences on our US's program for the National Nanotechnology Initiative. And I remember when Sri Lanka came online with their own version, because we were looking at that and trying to determine whether or not we were doing things right, because Sri Lanka all of a sudden came up with something pretty cool, and we were like, wow, they're doing this, maybe we should be learning from them. And you're taking advantage of the prowess in your textile engineering, as well as, that's material science and engineering. You're taking prowess in that and building off on it. And the advanced materials that are developing are key interest for the generation of next-gen manufacturing. I've been over the mass holdings. I work with those guys, and the technology they're developing over there is fantastic. Wearable devices that are integrated into our clothing that can actually measure your body, your biometric readouts, that can tell you to keep your posture straight. You know, that relates to other things, and it's really good stuff. And this organization is seeking to serve as a hub of excellence to create an innovation ecosystem here in Sri Lanka around nanotechnology. Another case example of what an innovation ecosystem can look like, Boston, Massachusetts. Now, Boston, Massachusetts is really interesting because it also has a massive life science hub. It's got Harvard, it has MIT, it's got these great educational institutions. But what folks don't realize is that it's also got a pretty budding innovation ecosystem of its own where it's applying the technology for purpose. And the clean tech growth in Boston, Massachusetts is phenomenal. My friends actually founded Greentown Labs. And it was 4 entrepreneurial nerds coming out of MIT who just needed workspace because they couldn't find any workspace and hardware space to build their technology. One was doing a battery chiller technology, thermal battery technology company. Another one right here was using aerostats to create flying wind turbines. That's the chiller right there from Promethean Power Systems. By the way, we funded, SBIR funded the development of that technology and the development of that technology. That's also really interesting to me. These guys over the last 5 years have taken their makeshift operations at home. They were in various warehouses from one year to the next, and they found their home in Somerville, Massachusetts, where they created this state-of-the-art co-sharing workspace environment with hardware capability. And when I say hardware, it's got Clean Lab, it's got the wet lab chemistry development. They're doing all sorts of stuff, and they've expanded even further. And they did this out of their own pockets, these 4 entrepreneurs. They just did it out of their own bootstrapping, being really innovative, taking advantage of the federal funding opportunities from the grants and contracts, and then going to the private sector where they got folks like GE and Veolia to back them up, to help develop and co-develop that technology forward. They have become pretty much a mega hub of excellence, and they now house over 40 cutting-edge startup companies. What's interesting about this one, Alturos, I presume some of you read one of those stories about in the newspaper, and there was the Alturos reference from the story. Ratan Tata is backing that company. That's what's really cool. So Adam Ray, the co-founder of this company, it's a flying wind turbine. When I say it's a flying wind turbine, I am telling you, it is a wind turbine that literally flies up in the sky. It just floats up there because that's a helium balloon. It's an aerostat. And it is keeping that wind turbine flying up in the sky and just propelling over and over like a kite. It generates terawatts of energy. That's what's interesting, because when you get up to that high altitude, that's terawatts of constant stream of energy. That you are taking advantage of that kinetic energy, pulling it into stored capacitors to then go off and build a viable opportunity for renewable, constant flow energy. And Ratan Tata saw the value of that and decided, I'm going to back you guys, and I'm going to ask you to deploy in India. And that was really cool when Adam told me that, because that was, this behemoth of a thought leader from India saying, that's pretty interesting, and I want to make this work because he's passionate about clean energy, he's passionate about solving climate change, and that's a potential for that. But what's really interesting about this innovation ecosystem in Greentown Labs is that it's the culture. The culture that these guys, these entrepreneurs have created there. They're working with the public and the private sectors. My agency, the SBA, we gave them a growth accelerator grant. And that was just a small chunk of change, but what they're doing is taking and capitalizing on it. They are doubling, tripling, quadrupling down and making a very robust environment so that these clean tech entrepreneurs who are tackling problems and technologies that are going to take years to develop and commercialize effectively, they're giving them a fighting chance here to mitigate. And that's what an innovation ecosystem does. It mitigates, it helps mitigate. It's a culture. It is a collaborative co-op between folks from different angles and perspectives in a multidisciplinary manner that goes and rallies around what I said in the previous slide. They rally around a particular area of interest. Here it's clean tech. The Silicon Valley ecosystem, that's the one everyone hears about all the time. Everyone wants to copy Silicon Valley. I love this quote from Chris Norman from Entrepreneur Magazine. If you look at all these companies that have come and gone over the years, from Oracle to Facebook to Global Foundries to Intel, Nokia, whatnot, what people don't realize that Silicon Valley was not overnight. That is over 50, 60 years in the making. Silicon Valley is the result of Sputnik, the result of federal funding, and a bunch of crazy hippies on drugs. Not gonna lie. Let's be honest, you can laugh, by the way. And by the way, I like having a dialogue, so if you want to ask questions while I'm talking, please, go for it. Seriously, Sputnik created this fear in America of like, oh my God, we're losing to the Russians. We need to win the space race. And then what was also interesting was at around that same time, the Brown versus Board of Education, this very famous legal precedent in the United States Act. For those who aren't familiar, pre-Brown versus Board of Education, we had segregation in the United States. So literal apartheid. And the black people and the white people, especially in the South, were taught in separate schools. Brown versus Board of Education, which was argued by Justice Thurgood Marshall, made it so when he won in front of the Supreme Court that everyone was going to be taught in the same environment. Black people, white people, Asians, whatever it may be, we're all going to be under the same roof and educate together. That brought in a very diversified pool of thinking all of a sudden. That brought in multiculturalism. That brought in the notion of different ideas from all sorts of walks of life. We're going to be brought in and create this cultural renaissance. The hippies also, I have to say, the hippie culture that is there, I lived there. It is so crazy, but the kids, they're not kids, adults really. They are driven by love. So what drives humans to do things? I always say is, my professor from business school told me once, love, pride, money, and fear. He always said, those are the main motivating factors that make humans do what they do. And what's interesting in the United States, when you look at the different cities, you will notice that they're driven on a core ethos. In San Francisco and San Jose, this is love. These are people who are collaboratively working together over and over in love of searching for new ideas and just risk-taking and going at it. If you go to New York City, that's money. That is Wall Street. That's just what that city runs on. If you go to DC, it's power, pride, ego. That's, it's politics for you. But a really good innovation ecosystem like Silicon Valley is not born overnight, and that's the critical thing I need to remind everyone, because these previous ones that I've talked about as case examples of interest, this is not going to be an overnight thing. This is going to be 15, 20 years. You have to be ready to go for the long haul if you want this to work. If you're thinking, we will create the next Facebook tomorrow, sorry, good luck, it's not going to happen. It just won't. That Facebook itself took 10 years to become big. That, Zuckerberg was working on that in college back in the early 2000s. It only became big, about 6, 7 years later. It takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. And that's the thing I have to remind folks. You have to invest and reinvest in the ecosystem to make it thrive. I put this slide here because this is really interesting. This is the next generation of venture capitalists, angel investor folks in the Valley who are really, really rocking it in Silicon Valley. They call themselves the PayPal Mafia for fun. But that's what it was. You see, the folks who took bets on them, the older generation, the HPs and the Intels, the Andrew Groves and whatnot, they have passed on the torch to these guys to be the torchbearers to keep Silicon Valley weird. And what's interesting about the PayPal Mafia is that when these guys made their billions off PayPal, they didn't take their money, go home, and buy a big house and a yacht and say goodbye, thank you very much. They took their money and they reinvested in themselves and in their friends to go and take on new areas of interest and really reinvent themselves. They reinvented themselves and they reinvested in themselves and the community around them. If you look at Elon Musk, he took his billions off PayPal and made Tesla, SpaceX, and Solar Cities what they are today. What folks don't realize that Elon Musk was so driven to make those companies work that he nearly went bankrupt a few years ago. That's what folks don't realize. My friends are actually some of my friends are early employees for Tesla and SpaceX, and they would tell me stories about Elon literally had to ask his friends for money just to keep a roof over his head and food for his kids, because he took everything and put it into those companies. And it wasn't until he was able to do it with some assistance from the government through our energy credit programs, and also his sheer fortitude to make that battery work in Tesla and make those shuttles work in SpaceX, that he was able to make it work. These guys all bet on each other. They all work with each other. Kramer Shaw took his stuff and made Cuba happen. That is a pioneer in next-gen microfinancing and microlending. That, he went social good. David Cook did the same thing with 500 startups. You see these guys who did YouTube, they took their smarts and they said, we're going to go and take technology and democratize it, and we're going to invest in new areas of interest that need to be tackled. Peter Thiel. I love mentioning Peter Thiel because what's really interesting about Peter Thiel is he made his money, he invested in Facebook, even made more money, and now what Peter Thiel's doing is he's got something called Breakout Labs. Breakout Labs bets on very high risk, high reward life science technology. He is betting on stuff like 3D printing of human tissue. He's betting on stuff around human genomics. He's betting on stuff around cancer research. He's tackling some very heavy-duty areas of interest. And he's taking his billions and he's putting it into those areas and betting on those research scientists to develop and hopefully commercialize and get it out to the public masses. That is all about investing and reinvesting in the ecosystem. They are not sitting on the laurels. They are going at it. They are doing what Wijewardene did. He was investing in the community over and over. We need more Rays. We need more of these guys and gals, by the way. I gotta say, women. That's the one thing I think we haven't done a good job about is women. Women in Sri Lanka, especially, 51% of the population. 51%. That is half the country's population. They play such an equal and crucial role. And if you look at the statistics and demographics about women in general around the world, they are much more savvier with money. They are much more into investing and reinvesting in the community, and they know how to turn a better profit. Not gonna lie, I've seen it happen. But we have to be willing to break through that cultural stigma and take those bets on that addition of cultural diversity, multiculturalism. And I will say, we've been guilty of that in the States. We have not done a better job about diversity of tech inclusion and making sure they are part of the conversation, both men and women and minorities of the sort in that dialogue when it comes to innovation ecosystems. The one disappointing thing I have to say here is a bunch of white men. Anyone in there?
Oh, what about
Oh, yeah, they got two. There
you go.
There we go. You got two. All right. Brown people represented by one. Sorry. But my point is that we got to do a better job. And what's really interesting, Greedy, Elon, Dave, they are starting to take bets and they're starting to really enforce it. They're betting on women. They're betting on minorities. They're making it very clear that they want to incorporate that next-gen thinking with a diversity mindset. I put this slide up as it relates to innovation ecosystems because there's a crucial metric that makes that very interesting to see what ones are thriving and doing well and what's not. And that metric is patent applications. What's really interesting in the United States perspective is that a lot of the patents filed in whatever sector it may be are coming from key areas of excellence. New York City, Boston right here. You've got Austin, Texas right here. You've got some stuff going on in the Midwest with Detroit and Chicago. Minnesota, Wisconsin, because of some of the health life science corridor that's going on there. Pacific Northwest with Oregon, and Portland, and Seattle. And then all here in California. All here, that whole from Los Angeles up to Silicon Valley. It's really interesting when you look at those cities and the things they're doing. One of the key barometers I've noticed over and over is patent filings. And this is from 2011, but it's a pretty telling case of like, if they have a thriving system that bets on each other and works with each other and focuses on each other and growing, you start to see a greater input of knowledge sharing, knowledge creation, wealth creation. That's what patents are. That's knowledge creation. That is knowledge creation going out to the public good. And I won't have time here, but if you click on this link, when you access my slides, well, actually I'll just do it right now. Because here's the thing that's making me surprised. The US is no longer leading patent filings. It's China. If you look at this from WIPO, China has gotten very serious. They are filing like there's no tomorrow. Compared to the US and Japan, they're just going over and over and over. They are going aggressive. They obviously see a value in this metric. They see a value in this investment. What is a patent, by the way? A patent is an asset. Anyone here who are accounting? Raise your hand if you're accounting or you know your finances. No? No here? Okay. Assets for any small business company or startup or major company. What is the key accounting equation? It's assets equal liabilities plus shareholder equity. Any good accountant's going to tell you when they balance the books, they're going to tell you balance those books, damn it. They want to know their liabilities and shareholder equities are equal to the assets. The money you put in and the money you put out. Oh, thank you. What is a patent? It's an asset. It's an intellectual property asset. That's what it is. When a venture capitalist puts in money on a startup or a small business company, they're looking at a lot of things. They're looking at the team. They're looking at the intelligence of the team. They're looking at the product. But they're also looking at how is that company protecting my asset? How is that company raising the barriers to entry and making sure my investment's going to be used properly? That's what patents do. Take it from an ex-patent guy. There are barriers to entry. And I can go into a whole lecture on that too as to whether or not that's good or bad, and I won't do that tonight. But that's just something to keep in mind. What's another crucial ingredient, though, that makes innovation ecosystems work? I love this. STEM. But not just STEM. It's STEM plus arts. What is this acronym? It is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. That has become a new thing in the US. There was all this big push about STEM, 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 STEM. And then the guys at RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, and a few other folks, including my friend Ryoko Ichima, started this new push and saying, hey, it's not just STEM, it's STEM plus arts. And as I said, my friend Ryoko, she is pioneering this push forward at Stanford University through the Center for Design Research, where she is trying to push on design thinking and art design thinking as it relates to STEM and core science and technology from basic and applied development. The arts play such a crucial role, it's not even funny. If you think about someone who knows how to play the violin or play the piano well, what is that? That is a derivative of mathematics. That's what that is. But it's taken it in a very unique and push purpose to make something creatively nuanced happen. If you look at the BlackBerry and the iPhone, the key difference between those two devices, I will tell you right now, is arts. The iPhone is STEM plus arts. The BlackBerry is just STEM. What did Steve Jobs do really well? He brought that humanistic, artistic thinking to Apple. He did not know jack shit about half the IT at that company. That was Steve Wozniak. Let's be honest for a second. Steve Wozniak was the brains at Apple when it came to the hardware and the science and the technology. That was Wozniak. But what Jobs brought was the humanistic play and the artistic thinking to Wozniak to say, hey, this is really cool stuff. But you gotta make it more friendly. You gotta make it more user-friendly and useful. And Jobs had, the idea to go steal some of that stuff from Xerox PARC. Let's be honest, he stole Dewey from Xerox. Xerox is still bitter about that. But he took it and figured out a useful, applied, humanistic purpose. Jobs is a hippie. When I was talking about Silicon Valley ecosystem, that is your hippie. Jobs was your quintessential hippie who made that area just kind of perk up. He was the guy who knew how to take your cool science and technology gizmo and really take it into a new direction and make it very humanistic. And this is a guy who studied Japanese calligraphy. If you read his bio and read about his background, it's pretty interesting, his background and what he did. He traveled all through India. He went to all these different ashrams and came back and was kind of like, hey dude, what And then he saw Wozniak and he was like, whoa, really? Like I said, if you're going to have a really vibrant innovation ecosystem, and that's why I go back, when you go to the Greentown Ops one, all my friends there are pretty art enthusiastic bucks. Those guys are all science and technology nerds, but they will take some downtime, and they all play musical instruments. They all take in art shows and all that stuff. My buddy Adam is, he and I go to rock shows and stuff like that. That is a crucial ingredient to let the mind grow and clean itself and take on new areas of interest that better than ever. My fiance, sorry, I'm going to call her for a second. She's an art major. She's an art history background. She brings that humanistic side to me in my relationship, because I'm a science tech nerd, and she brings in that art statistic side to me. That is really cool. Her dad was an artist. Her dad was a really brilliant artist. He was the chief of design at General Motors. The Cadillacs, the new design that everyone sees every day on the road, that was her dad. He was an artist. He was the guy who went and pushed the engineers and said, hey, let's do something really cool with the grills, and let's do something really cool with the fittings and all this stuff. And the engineers would say, that's not going to work. And then Kip would say, well, let's make it work. That's what the artists do. They bring that new idea out there saying, you don't know until you try it. You don't know until you do it. Her dad is a trip anyway, sorry. I love the guy. He was my father once. Going into 7, this is where it gets really interesting, is that it's all about immersion learning and exposure. And it's all about universities and liberal arts colleges joining forces to create multidisciplinary focused curriculum. You have to have free and confluence modes of thinking and engagement, and the best part, they're the perfect test bed environments to mitigate risk-taking and non-knowledge. That's what university is really good about. It's good about bringing different ideas together and allowing you to experiment in ways that you never thought before without feeling like you're going to lose your house and your shirt and your dog and everything else there. And it enables a culture of curiosity and cross-pollination. I think one of the coolest things I loved when I was an undergrad at RPI years ago is that I didn't just study material science and engineering. I also took on a second degree in studying philosophy. And so I got exposed to both science and engineering nerds and also the liberal art mindset, and really start blending the two worlds together as to, if I'm going to build this from a philosophical context, what's going to be the output of this? Steve Sasson, he mentored the digital camera. He's a friend. I'm on the board of the AAA Slumps and Invention Ambassadors program, and he was one of our first invention ambassadors. And during a panel that he and I did, I asked him this question. I said, so Steve, you created the digital camera. So how do you take on your role of responsibility for the promulgation of selfies? Do you take ownership for having created that situation to occur? And Steve just looked at me thoughtfully and said, Nagesh, as an inventor, there's this notion where you have intended consequences, and then you have unintended consequences. But there's also a third set of consequences, and that's called perverse consequences. And he said, the selfie kind of falls under that line. Steve's a clip, he's alright. I love, every time I get a hang out with Steve Sasson, he's just alright. But what's really cool about Steve Sasson, by the way, and this is actually a nice side tirade from me. Steve Sasson created the digital camera in the 70s. And he created it at Kodak. He was an engineer at Kodak. He's an alum of RPI, my alma mater, by the way. Electrical engineering guy. And that's why he and I bonded a lot too, because we were both principal polytechnic nerds. But what was really crazy is when Steve told me the story, he was like, "Now, I created the digital camera at Kodak." And the senior executives at Kodak just kind of looked at me blankly and said, well, when is this coming on the horizon? And then Steve said, well, as soon as you want it to be. And they're like, well, we're doing pretty good with silver halide technology. We've got control on that. Why would we want something so stupid like a digital camera? Who would use a digital camera? Is essentially what they said to Steve. And Steve was like, okay. And he invented it, sat on the shelf of Kodak. Patents expired, by the way. He had patents on it. They expired. Canon and all those guys jumped at the first shot of opportunity, built it out, and where is Kodak today? Nowhere. They're a thing of the past. It's sad to say. The only thing left that Kodak has is their patents, by the way. That's the only thing they're grasping on to try to monetize to keep themselves alive. It gets really complicated from there. But my point here is that if you're going to do this, you gotta create diverse thinking, and you gotta take a culture of risk taking. That was critical. If Kodak had that notion of risk taking, they would have been dominating. They would have dominated themselves. I think that's what's interesting about Apple right now. You've noticed with Apple's products that they've gotten kind of plain lately. I won't deny it. If you look at the new iterations of the Apple products, it's not as cool as a leap to the next thing as they were before. What Steve Jobs did, what was interesting in Apple, was that he constantly forced his employees to innovate and put the coolest thing out there on a regular basis. He didn't care about market cannibalization. He wanted to dominate the markets and put the coolest thing out there and make people go, wow, I don't want this, I want that now. He did a really good job, but if you notice lately, the sales are lagging. Like I still have my iPhone 5, 3 years, almost 4 years now. I haven't felt the need to upgrade it. Maybe, but I don't know. There's no need. And so that gets me into where did the private sector make sense? And it builds into a lot of questions. What type of entity plays the perfect catalytic role for technology development? Are major corporates the sole source of inspiring adoption and mainstream integration? How do major corporates challenge themselves to embrace and adopt disruptive innovation early on? I just gave you the Apple example versus the Kodak example. My next slide tells the story of how two small businesses and university research proved to be quite catalytic. And this is why I'm proud of my program that I helped run at the U.S. Small Business Administration. I'm proud to work with my bosses, Mark Walsh and John Williams, because our SBIR STTR program played a key role in that. Biogen and IDEC. Biogen IDEC is one company today. They are responsible for taxing. And taxing is the drug that is used to help alleviate with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, the cancer drug. What's interesting is Biogen came out of Boston, out of Phil Sharp's lab at MIT, and IDEC came out of San Diego out of Professor Igor Roysterman's lab. They both received original awards from the SBIR program in 85-86 timeframe when they were developing their core technology. Now they're a big company and they don't get any more SBIR funding. They haven't for a long time. But their key, crucial funding to catalyze that technology forward was the SBIR program. And what's really interesting is that these two companies, Biogen and IDEC, are responsible for initiating the life science quarter hubs in Boston and San Diego. They played such a crucial role. They now employ over 7,000. They have a market cap of $60.46 billion, and it's all high STEM, STEAM plus arts, white-collar jobs. They have led that to happen. And if you think about the trickle-down effect, and if you think about the way the dollars flow out, because it's not just them, it's the people who support them, who support service industries and other companies that do joint research and whatnot, they all are part of that big economy that play into that. A small business can make a big impact if done right, but once again, it's a community thing. If you look at the communities of Boston, Massachusetts, which I already disclosed to you about the Cleantech area, and in San Diego, they're all about investing and reinvesting in each other. All about that. What's really unique in the US is that we have all these different options when it comes to commercial scale and targeted assistance from an innovation ecosystem. You have clusters, incubators, growth accelerators, small business development centers, and public research labs. They all serve their purpose and help you spawn up and scale up. And depending on the type of company that is involved, you go in an a la carte form as to what you need for your support services. But once again, this is based on a crucial ingredient. The government and the public, private, and nonprofit sectors working together in a cohesive and qualified environment to facilitate using these platforms to draw and develop the innovation ecosystems forward. Crucial ingredients to make an innovation ecosystem forward. I've said this over and over in my slides, but sum it up. You got to have freedom to innovate and operate. You have to have a strong rule of law. People need to feel confident that when they are operating, growing their companies and doing well, that they're not going to get hit by the boogeyman. They want to know they're going to do it. They're going to do it well. Multidisciplinary driven environment. That is so huge. It's not even funny. A strong embrace for diverse thinking. A key thing that has helped America do well, and this is why I noticed at the notion of Trump presidency, to be honest with you, because this is, I'll say it, if I get fired, whatever. If you become president, fine. I'll fire you. I'm a pro-immigration guy, talented folks. My parents left India because there was opportunities in the United States. They left India to go find new horizons. And what's interesting is a lot of Indians in India now are going back to India because it seems to be the case that Modi and his government in India is saying, startups, 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 let's do this. And he is encouraging immigration. When I was in Vietnam over the last couple of weeks, what was really interesting was a lot of non-Vietnamese doing their startups in Vietnam. There was a complex called Dreamflex. And when I visited it, and literally I visited a week after the president had visited during this historic visit to Vietnam, I looked at all the people in that complex thinking it was going to be all Vietnamese people. This is in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City. Half of it was full of Europeans and Americans working side by side with the Vietnamese to start building up that startup culture and start building up the fintech and the IT and cybersecurity landscape that Vietnam wants to start to dominate. You have to have a support and encouragement of immigration of talented folks. That's what makes America really work well, is the heterogeneous population that we have. That diverse, multi-plurality environment. You also have to have a culture of competitive collaboration. Silicon Valley is really competitive. Those are a bunch of hyper-active nerds who are going out there and trying to make the next big thing happen. But what's really interesting, during my time when I lived out there, is that we weren't just competitive, we were also collaborating. We were sharing ideas, we were sharing our thoughts, best practices. We constantly share information. Why? Because we were all betting on each other to do well. Yes, one of us wanted to be alpha and the other wanted to be beta, and whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, we were all betting on each other because we all believed in this collective high-tech commune notion that we were going to build a better community and a better world around us. The last thing, you got to be willing to play the long game. And when I point out the notion of Silicon Valley, that's the long game. That's the result of 50, 60 years in the making. In Sri Lanka with Slintech, you've got to be willing to play that long game. You can't think this is an overnight switch. The benefits from a thriving innovation ecosystem: you get excellent talent, you get density and growth, you got a really cool culture to build out, money keeps on flowing in and out, and hopefully you have smarter regulations. And you learn from each other on what works for regulation, better law as you keep on innovating and growing each other forward. Because I was in Vietnam, I wanted to bring this out, because this is really interesting. This is the new roadmap that Vietnam government, the Ministry of Science and Technology team is doing to really facilitate a new startup innovation ecosystem. And this is their 2.0, and the Founder Institute put this together. Look at all these accelerators, incubators, capital for quick capital access to scale up, Series A and D funding opportunities, co-working space environments, government programs and coordination from the Vietnamese government, and also through the World Bank and IMF partnerships, corporate venture capital, all these different event program opportunities to bring startups and entrepreneurs together and trade information. I spoke at the startup fair in Da Nang recently at the end of my trip in Vietnam. They're going in it. The community and media telling each other's story forward. That is huge. It's all about the narrative. Okay. Okay. We have 4 industrial revolutions as I close up. We had the first one, mechanical production, railroads, and steam power. We had the second one in the 1870s, and that was mass production of electrical power and avenue and assembly line. The third one, which gave birth to Silicon Valley, automated production of electronics and computers. This is the fourth one, This is where artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, robotics, agri-tech, clean water, all that stuff. We are in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution. And this is going to be huge. This is going to be, if Sri Lanka wants to make that next big thing happen, this is where you got to capitalize on it now. I'm not saying these specific industries, but the fact that it's occurring now, you got to jump on the page immediately. So, as I start to close up, what innovation ecosystems make sense for Sri Lanka? I've got a few that I've been noticing already during my travels that might be of interest, and that's fintech, obviously nano, obviously textile, agro-tech, especially clean energy. You guys are situated on an island that gets a lot of sun constantly, 365 days of the year. Almost, except for monsoon season, but still a lot of sun. And if you look at it, that is a great opportunity to build out on the prowess for solar technology. You've got the beach, you've got the waves, you've got terawatts of energy in the clouds, you've got the ocean around you. That is a great, sustainable set of energy that you can capitalize on. It is so imperative that you think about tackling that, and especially in agri-tech. I saw a company in Vietnam. They're doing something really interesting called, and the company's name is Mimosa Tech. And it's around predictive analytics. And what Mimosa Tech is doing is they're helping farmers use the power of IT and predictive analytics to increase their crop yield, to figure out if the geochemistry, the weather, the pH, all that stuff, to figure out what crops are going to grow in that environment at that time, and more importantly, which seeds to bet on, which is going to help increase their crops. What's really interesting, because what I met with Mimosa Tech, is that their competitors include Blue River Technology and CropX. CropX is out of, I think, Australia or New Zealand, and Blue River is out of Silicon Valley. CropX and Blue River are being backed by Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, and now the chairman of Google, is taking a big bet on agrotech. And he's calling it. And that's what was really interesting, is that he is saying, through his VC fund Innovation Endeavors, let's start betting on predictive analytics for crops. What I'm saying here is in Sri Lanka, you have a big farming community. That is low-hanging fruit. And if you can increase the operational efficiency and efficacy for farming just by a little bit, in a sustainable and healthy manner, you can do so much more. The future positive entrepreneurial change agents for Sri Lanka, these are just a few who I've started to witness. There are a lot more. I think my favorite right here at the moment is Charitha and Prasanna. I met them yesterday. And they're doing something really cool. This goes on to my emphasis on agri-tech. They are taking they're going at sustainable ecotourism for Charitha, and for Prasanna, he's taking this prowess that he learned at Mass Holdings, and he's putting it towards organic foods and making sure the farmers have a better bet and get access to opportunity to sell their goods to greater markets. The local farmer here in Sri Lanka can get their papaya in the market at Frank's, and guess what? People care about their food. You know, what's interesting for Kaylee and I, as we've been journeying through Vietnam and Sri Lanka, and actually in Portland, Oregon, when we had stopped to see my sister, is how much healthier the food was. How much fresher, cleaner, organic. I've lost weight, and I like that. I like the fact that I'm eating healthy food and feeling healthier. And we're kind of dreading the fact that when we leave to DC in a couple of weeks from now, that we're going to be going back to an environment of cardboard and highly processed foods. You know, healthy living. You know, when I said in my article in the, I think it was the not Daily Mirror, but in the FT about social media being garbage. Here's the preface. Social media is great when it comes to democratization of information, and it's really great with knowledge sharing. And that's where the important thing happens. And that's what these guys are doing, is they're empowering information to go forward, and they're helping bring a brighter innovation ecosystem to Sri Lanka to empower anyone and everyone to get access to better, healthier, quality foods, and empowering the farmer to get a better say. I love what Kalina is doing with Tekata with his Adrinos, and with TACAS. These guys are really taking this notion of empowering the community and the world around them through entrepreneurship. And the really cool thing about entrepreneurship, and as it relates to innovation ecosystems, It doesn't know race, it doesn't know creed, it doesn't know gender, it doesn't know age. Anyone can be an entrepreneur when you're willing to take a risk, you're willing to take a bet. In closing, be bold. Solve a problem for 1 billion people in mind. I think Sri Lanka is poised to do great things. This is 10 years now post-conflict, and you're just at the cusp of doing some amazing stuff. And I'm seeing great talent, I'm seeing innovative minds, I'm seeing a brighter future, but it requires a family to make this happen, and it's going to require all of us rising together collectively in this country and bringing a positive, brighter future for everyone through entrepreneurship. And that's what's going to help make a really robust innovation ecosystem grow. And as to what this country decides as to the innovation ecosystems that you want, you've got a lot of few good bets. And it's just going to take time. And hopefully you'll be patient to play for the long game. So, that's my story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. Thank you, Mr. Rao, for that highly inspiring and informative talk. And now, ladies and gentlemen, as a mark of thanks and recognition for delivering this year's Dr. Wijewardene Memorial Lecture, the President of the IESL, Engineer Vimalasena Gamage, will now present a plaque of appreciation to the keynote speaker, Engineer Mr. Nagesh Rao.
I'm willing to take some questions if time permits. No? Oh, okay.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we are actually pressed for time, as I've been told. So now for the final address of the evening, I would like to invite to the podium the distinguished engineer, a committee member of the Agricultural and Engineering Sectional Committee of the IESL, Engineer Gamini Ranasinghe.
I am here to propose a vote of thanks. Now, actually, for memorial orations, we do not provide for question and answer. Though I know there have been lots of questions, but I am sorry, tradition is such, and on the other hand, there is a time limitation. So let me now thank the President of the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka, board member of the Wijewardene Charitable Trust. Thank you for being here with us, and also for planning and executing all that was needed to have this memorial lecture held here today. Next is our guest speaker, Nagesh Rao. We all heard his wonderful delivery. How important you were to us earlier. I'd like to tell you that when we heard you were going to be around Sri Lanka at this time of the year, we decided to advance the memorial lecture to this day, because normally it is held in August on date of Dr. Wijewardene's birthday. But we decided you are worth so much to us that we advanced it to today.
I hope it was worth it.
One lesson we can take home is that as many of my fellow engineers are concerned, engineering is important. We have to see things in that direction of engineering, but do not forget to look at other related areas, look at things in a multidisciplinary way, appreciate, value all other areas other than merely engineering. That's one lesson. The second lesson is I think to create a innovative ecosystem, Sri Lanka certainly needs some cultural change. And we know that is one of the most difficult things. But we, as engineers and as citizens of this country, we must find out how do we make that cultural change. Otherwise we have to do that. There is no choice. We cannot give up by saying we can't make cultural changes. Next, I would like to thank the ambassador for the Netherlands for being present with us here. We are greatly honored by your presence. Our Minister Wijewardene is here today. Yes, thank you, sir. Okay, thank you for being with us today. And now, past presidents, fellow engineers, thank you for being here in large numbers. And then I'd like to thank the staff and everybody in the institution and others who were behind the scenes getting the various facilities ready for this function. And last of all, I must tell you that the large number that is here today is evidence that this is a very valuable lecture, and I thank all of you for having been here with us. Thank you very much.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this memorable evening. But I wish to take a minute of your time to express thanks and gratitude to the following persons and institutions on behalf of the Wijewardene Charitable Trust. Firstly, the esteemed keynote speaker for this evening, Engineer Nagesh Rao, for delivering the Wijewardene Memorial Lecture. The Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka for hosting this event, for providing the venue and all facilities. Sincere thanks are also hereby expressed to the following members of the Fourth Estate for providing valuable media publicity prior to the event. The exclusive print media sponsor of this event is the Vijay Group, and under that group the following publications are hereby acknowledged: Daily FT, Daily Mirror, the Sunday Times, Lanka Deepa and High Magazine. And also the electronic media sponsors are RTV. And thus we come to the conclusion of this year's Wijewardene Memorial Lecture. Thank you all for your attendance, and I bid you all a very good evening.